So, how real can a mock-up sound? Well, it's entirely possible for a mock-up to sound so good and so detailed that even a trained ear would have trouble telling the difference. Here's a piece featuring solo upright bass. And now, here it is again being played on a real bass. The little piccolo and flute flurries are actual samples of solo flute and piccolo going bloop. So they can't help but sound real. But the first version of the bass part that I played you, that's a Vienna Instruments solo bass, and I used a lot of MIDI futzing to get it to be expressive. But there is something about the level of detail in each one of those parts which makes them sound more real than fake. However, what sounds real to one person may not sound real to another. I'll tell you a little story. Once upon a time, I was scoring a project with another composer, and I sent him a cue I was working on to get his feedback. And the feedback was, "Your strings sound fake." And I was like, "What? Really?" So then he sends me a cue that he wrote to get my feedback. And of course I listened to it, and I thought to myself, man, his strings sound fake. So really, to a large extent, realism is in the ear of the beholder. And different beholders may have different feelings about what they want instruments to sound like, what they expect them to sound like, and so on. All I know is that the vibe that I try to get across in my mock-ups, depending on the style of course, is based on a distillation of the experiences I've had in the studio and live listening to soloists and ensemble players, and being a player myself, I'm intimately familiar with certain details of the instruments that I play. So all of that comes into play in my approach to using sampled instruments, which is to try and reproduce the dynamics, expressive qualities, and certain nuances that I'd expect to hear from a really good solo player or from an A-list recording orchestra. Now, I do draw the line at trying to replicate such nuances as a violinist's beard scratching against the chin rest, but I will try my best to put in a certain level of detail and, most importantly, a level of expression into each instrument so that musically and emotionally they don't just lay flat like my original sketch of the bass part. So while it's possible to achieve a very high level of detail and realism in a mock-up, certain musical gestures just don't translate well to using samples. Or maybe they would, but you just don't happen to own the particular library best suited to realize that part. Of course, you always have the option to hire an instrumentalist or a group to perform the part. But if that's not economically feasible, there's a third option. And in the next video, I'll tell you what this third option is all about, and it can have a profound effect on how real your mock-ups sound.